Before we start our meeting, I would like us to pause for a minute of silence to recognize and honor the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on Thursday, September 8th. She was our Queen for 70 years. May her memory live on for eternity. Thank you. Welcome to the Rotary Club of meeting of Monday, September 12th, 2022. I remind all Rotarians that September is Basic Education and Literacy Month. Now I'll ask Malcolm Cox to introduce our guest speakers, John Eberhard and Barry Moncrieff.
Thank you, President Rick. Today, as Rick has just said, we have two speakers joining us, John Eberhard and Barry Moncrieff. They will be talking about the Thames River Group. Our inimitable John Eberhard joined the Rotary Club of London in 1971. He canoed with his father, the secretary of the club at that time, at the age of 10. And with a lifetime love of the canoe, he was founder of the Canadian Canoeing Association. He was past chair of Canoe Canada and founder of the International Fellowship of Canoeing Rotarians, and now a life member of the London Canoe Club. Barry Moncrieff's career includes professor and program coordinator, environment technology program at Fanshawe College. He was professor in a Provincial Offences officer for drinking water inspector in the Ontario Ministry of the Environment. He is a BSc in environmental studies and a master in environment and business. Please join me in welcoming John and Barry today.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, for those introductions. And I'm delighted to be in front of my own Rotary Club again on a topic of interest to many. I'm also delighted to share the time with environmental professional Barry Moncrieff, who is a longtime member of the London Rowing Club and member of the steering committee for the River Group. President Rick, that was a worthy tribute to the Queen, and it reminded me of her interest and support of the Henley Regattas and the rowing events on the other Thames River, which she supported wholeheartedly. As mentioned, my connection with the river goes back to when I was a boy. I paddled from Springbank Park to the forks of the Thames, and perhaps it was that excursion that made canoeing a lifetime pursuit and a pleasure, and countless boardroom canoeing years for me. The Heritage River Thames itself has been a place of pride for our city for some 200 years and of importance for some 10,000 years before that. It's been navigable to the forks since the recreational barrier was put into the pump house in 1870. The recreational Springbank Dam, on which Don Stevens' grandfather was a contractor, was built in 1929. So throughout that period, the river has been a gathering place, a place of recreation and pleasure for thousands of Londoners. It's been a jewel of a city, and it's now our treasure hiding in plain sight. The first slide perhaps indicates our message today. It's a twofold theme to highlight what we believe to be the necessary balance between the beautification of the river, reviving its recreational potential, and the obvious need for environmental stewardship. This, I hope, will be a penetrating glance into the obvious. Have you noticed how many successful cities have a navigable river running through them? The Thames River Group wants to see a return of recreational use for the thousands who enjoyed that stretch from Springbank to Forks before the seasonal barrier was damaged in 2002. We also want to encourage the city to beautify the Thames, the historic centerpiece of the city, so important to our municipal history, its culture, and its beauty. Who is the River Group, you might ask? Well, our group consists of a consortium of Heritage River stakeholders who want to return to the river as it was before the demise of the Springbank Seasonal Dam. It's a collaborative and inclusive coalition of people, communities, organizations, private sector, NGOs, and institutional groups dedicated to the conservation and enhancement. Today, the forks of the Thames at the foot of Dundas Place is a shameful skeleton of its former summer place beauty. So we want to talk to you about that. The priorities of the representative 20-member steering committee is committed to the preservation of the river's ecosystem and the blending of traditional and modern recreational uses of the Thames, revitalizing the Antler River watershed. I'm happy to tag team today with another member of that steering committee. Barry is an environmental professional, as you heard, and formerly with the Ontario Ministry of the Environment. We have a singular purpose. You should know that 3 years ago, the City Council passed a resolution to partially decommission the seasonal barrier at Springbank, thereby reducing water levels all the way back to the forks of the Thames at Dundas Place. Our quest is to persuade the city to reopen the conversation on the importance of reactivating the seasonal dam to allow the thousands who once enjoyed the use of the river to experience its value once again. To do this, City Council must vote to reconsider its decision, and that's not easily done.
For context, Springbank Dam was damaged in 2002 and rendered inoperable in 2006 after a newly installed steel gate failed during testing. The subsequent legal settlement was received in 2015 by the city. In 2017, the One River Master Plan Environmental Assessment considered the future use of the recreational dam. Decommissioning was the preferred option of the City Council, which agreed to partial removal of the operational parts of the dam. The contract to do the work has now been let. In recent months, we talked with most of the city councillors, including the mayor. In a sentence, they say they do not want to discuss the council decision because it is a decision that has already been made. And we do not want to revisit the information coming from the One River Plan. We believe the council decision was made in error. Council had incomplete information at the time. The environmental assessment studies were to address environmental and social impacts. Environmental issues were prioritized over stakeholder interests and impacts. In addition, the carbon footprint resulting from the dam decommissioning was ignored. The report demonstrates a blurred connection between removal of the dam and improved water quality. We have concluded that 42 stormwater outlets and 6 sewage effluent discharge points in the north, south, and main channel of the Thames River are the cause of deteriorated water quality, not the dam. Council was misled by Upper Thames River Conservation Authority input and relied on a staff-backed decision of the Public Works Committee from the previous council that had incomplete data on which to make a recommendation. The public consultation process was biased and flawed. Stakeholders were ignored.
So we want to emphasize that our mission is simply to ask council, 1, to reconsider the decommissioning decision, and 2, to delay the partial decommissioning process. There is now more current information, as Barry says, and science that will assist in a fresh debate. Now, with so many excellent policies that our council, our city council, has created under the leadership of Rotarian Mayor Ed, a decision to reconsider will lead to conversations about the Heritage River and the recreational opportunities and its aesthetic value in the context of the city's current various plans. Firstly, the tourism plan and the economic impact assessment of local events, the mobility plan, and an ambitious trail initiative, which has ignored the river trail, a diversity and inclusion proclamation, and the climate emergency plan, our city's carbon footprint plan. The discussion could lend support to having a boating season and access for the thousands of citizens that once used the 7.5 kilometer stretch of river between Bowler Road and the Forks for yet another 200 years. The city's transportation and land use decisions focus on improving mobility for residents of the city by providing variable and viable choices through all modes of travel. The City of London strategic plan identified a vision as a city of opportunity. The aspirational sustainable level of water in the Thames from Springbank to the Forks addresses forms of transportation that reflect each of the objectives of the city's policies. During the recreation months, the river is a source of green and mature city that respects its heritage and culture and opportunity. Paddling a scull or a canoe leaves no carbon footprint, and recreationally boaters who have been forced to travel to Sharon Dam or Fanshawe Lake quite dramatically contribute to an increase in our carbon footprint. All that is needed is 1.5 meters of water at the Forks to accomplish that and to avoid those negative results. So the vision of the River Group is to realize a healthier community sustained by enhancing the values of our heritage Thames River and reconciling it with its history. We need to find a balance between recreational activity on the river trail and environmental concerns. And a healthier and happy community calls for enhancing the values of our heritage river. Think of what our neighboring communities have done. Activities on the reservoirs created on the Upper Thames North Branch, for example, at Wildwood Dam, at St. Mary's, at Stratford. Those reservoirs created by their recreational dams continue to bring pleasure to sightseers, to kayakers, to the swans, to paddleboat enthusiasts. And today, you see virtually no activity on the river in London section of the Thames, not since the dam broke. So our city council has rejected the notion of beautifying the Thames or bringing back the recreational opportunities we once enjoyed. There are important questions to be asked. Is the river healthier today than it was when the seasonal dam went down and was not fixed? Council's option was a lawsuit, and simply put, the money in the bank for the eventual fix of the seasonal dam. Why did that not happen? Respected environmentalists have concluded that the reason seasonal dam has made no difference to the state of the health of the river. Then why preclude the thousands from using the reservoir during the recreation season?
The River Group is focused on the area between Springbank Park on the west end of the City of London and the Forks of the Thames. Guidelines of the Heritage River Program foster the use of the waterway by recreational activities. They were evidenced in the use of the river by the London Canoe Club, the London Rowing Club, the Dragon Boat Organization, Pleasure Craft, fishers, and citizens now utilizing the adjacent bike and walking paths. It is this diversity of recreational activity combined with natural attractions which makes the Thames unique. This is why it received its heritage designation. Examples of this recreational diversity include all forms of boating, including paddle boating, rafting, water skiing, and high performance rowing. The London Canoe Club was the largest canoe club in North America until the dam broke. And the Tornado City Boating Sail Club was the oldest boat sailing club in Canada. The last regatta to be held on the river, which begins just west of Warncliffe Road Bridge and finishes at the pump house, was the Head of the Thames Regatta. It drew rowers from as far away as Illinois, Michigan, and New York states. It generating operating funds for the club. Its economic impact generated revenue for the city businesses. With no water in the river during the recreational season, many river clubs and organizations have literally been decimated.
The Thames combined numerous unique human heritage and recreation values, making it worthy of its designation as a heritage river. Not anymore, as Barry says. The natural history features of the watershed have supported the evolution of local history, human heritage, and recreation values for decades until 20 years ago. Pioneers used canoes and rafts to reach London, plus transport goods to early London settlement. Rowing competition on the rivers date to the late 1840s. Major events held on the river included the Ontario Summer Games and Central Ontario Rowing Association regattas. Some of you will remember the dinner cruises from Springbank to the Forks. Canoe and dragon boat regattas attracted participants from distant places and raised a lot of charitable dollars for those in need in the city. And the water levels allowed for skiing and ski jumping. Well, those competitions are now gone. Today, the water levels of the Thames is at a historic low. The city decision has decimated on-river clubs and organizations. Rowing Canada's national high-performance team trained at the clubhouse on Wonderland Road and competed on Fanshawe Lake. But one of the reasons that caused them to relocate to a center in British Columbia was the high concentration of blue-green algae at Fanshawe. This algae has not been present after the dam was put down in Fanshawe, and it never existed below Fanshawe Dam until the dam did go down at Fanshawe. Dragon boat races, another example of an activity that provided funds for charity, and no longer take place in this section of the river. Canoe instructors from the London Canoe Club can no longer teach canoe enthusiasts at the Boathouse Reservoir, and there's no canoe or paddle boat rentals available anymore. There's no access for canoe owners who store their boats at the clubhouse to the river. The water is now so low and separated by aggressive and invasive species, and the portage from the concrete dock at the river is simply impossible to get a boat from the boathouse to the river today. The docks are no longer able to be used. And of course, pollution is a major and growing problem.
Some of the figures I'm about to read may shock you, but they are true. The September 22nd, 2021 storm led to major overflows in London, with 60 million liters of raw, untreated sewage sent into the Thames River. It's a consistent problem in London, usually linked to dramatic rainfalls that overwhelm old sewers that handle both stormwater and sewage, and ultimately the city's wastewater treatment plants. City Hall's division manager of wastewater said it caused the overflow of 10 times more raw and partially treated sewage than London's wastewater plants have seen in the year before that storm. More than 77 million liters were kept in holding tanks and other storage systems and gradually released from wastewater treatment plants once the water flows had dropped. Another 118 million liters of partially treated sewage to remove, or partially treated to remove solid and biological material before they were discharged. This is not an unusual occurrence. With significant growth in the city, the treatment plants are typically at capacity. Said Skylar Frank, head of the London Environmental Network, any amount of raw sewage in the river is too much. This has been an issue ongoing in London for many years and will continue to be until combined sewers are separated and we have infrastructure to address it. Additional information for Council will assist in review of the Council's 2019 decision. This will not happen unless Council agrees to reconsider the situation and the decision. We believe Council was misled by the recommendations of the former Council. There is no information warranting a review of the decision to partially decommission the seasonal Springbank Dam. The promise of a healthier river with no Springbank Reservoir has not been fulfilled. We have studied the One River Master Plan Assessment Report and subsequent testing data, and it states that the water quality in the Thames was projected to improve if the seasonal Springbank Dam was partially decommissioned. Nearly 20 years have passed. This is not evident that the water quality has improved.
Current city policies and declarations cannot be fully implemented without a revitalized river from Springbank to the Forks. Since the dam decommissioning decision was made, the equity, diversity, and inclusion policy has been adopted by Council. Contrary to the intent of that policy, Londoners are currently unable to connect with nature or to access many of the recreational opportunities which were once available at the center of the city. While we applaud Council's adoption of the Climate Emergency Action Plan, the London Plan, the Thames River Corridor Plan, the Tourism Plan, the Trails Extension Initiative, not one of those can be fully implemented as long as the Thames River remains at low water levels during the summer months. The beautification and functionality of the Thames can only be revitalized by the repair of the recreational dam, which creates the recreational and revitalized reservoir from Springbank to the Forks. leaving 1.5 meters of water at the forks. Imagine Dundas Place. Could it become the visionary people's place by applying city policies? Since the adoption of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Dundas Place has been completed. This area has great potential to encourage artistic and cultural activities and to realize economic benefits at the forks of the Thames, including the realization of a music district. But this potential will remain unrealized if the forks remains in a state of neglect. We need a sustained level of water to allow a plan like the Back to the River plan to go forward. We maintain that the onus is on the city to prove that the river is healthier today, as promised, than it would be when the dam broke years ago. It has not done so.
Blue-green algae in Fanshawe Lake drives people away. This condition did not exist behind the Springbank Dam. On the subject of turtles, that had a persuasive impact on the decision by council. The myth has turtled. Upper Thames River Conservation Authority and the university do replenish this endangered turtle population. There is no indication if their eggs gathering work is located near the 7.5 kilometer of river between the Forks and Springbank. There are 760 kilometers of riverbank on both sides of the river from the source to Lake St. Clair. There is no comparative studies of impact on this and many other threatened species to make the connection between a free-flowing river that is the 7.5 kilometer stretch. The facts. Now that 20 years has gone by since the water has been running free, we are able to measure the results and find that water quality has not changed or improved. We also note unintentional impacts of the decision. Sediment creating an island around the Dundas Street Bridge abutment, aggressive and invasive shrubbery growing along the edges of the river, garbage and graffiti, all of which make the jewel of the center of London unsightly. Black willow trees now crown the banks, obscuring views and access to the very functional walking trails and prevent turtles from reaching breeding grounds. The case for balance between recreational activity on the river trail and environmental concerns is obvious. The loss of recreational activity on the river trail has had an impact on thousands of citizens. The balance has been lost. As water levels drop in May and June, additional species accumulate and the vantage point of the river from the trails diminish. In many places, impossible to see or walk on the river's edge. On the representation made by the Thames Valley anglers and the fish passage issue of spawning, a study was conducted by Biotactic over 3 years, sometime around 2010. And this information is in the master plan report. The conclusion from the report, although the dam does not provide although the dam does provide some interference, it is not seen as a complete barrier. Indeed, spawning takes place in March through mid-May. The dam will be open during that period, thus allowing the fish to migrate to the dam at Fanshawe Lake. The conclusion is the dam has done nothing to affect the fisheries. Downstream communities continue to be affected by the quality of water. The same amount and quality of water and the same level of pollution flows past Byron, barrier or no barrier.
Part of the City Council decision related to consultation and public engagement with the Indigenous communities downstream. They concluded on the basis of one comment from one of the sub-chiefs at one of the Indian reservations that the dam was a problem. Well, we have done our own individual consultation with the 4 Indian communities, and we have found that the leadership today have a different opinion of the dam. That consultation process revealed that the 3 Indigenous communities downstream from the dam, namely Oneida, Chippewa, and Muncie, Delaware. None of their leaders attribute their pollution issues to the dam at Springbank. Indeed, since the dam has been down, 2 of the 3 have had boil water advisories imposed. The third one, the Oneida Nation, has in fact received approval for funding to a connection with the Great Lake water through a pipeline, which will solve their problem, which has been extant for nearly 40 years. Let's take a look at the costs. Here's an ironic fact that we discovered. There is significant economic consequence to the value of the city by the loss of the recreational activity on the river. The losses are self-evident through the economic multiplier approach to public activity, such as those that were evidenced in the various clubs that have used the river 20 years ago. And the cost of repair versus the cost of decommissioning is another interesting fact. Believe it or not, it costs $6.8 million to do the dam repairs from 2002 to 2006. Then the dam broke. It'll cost $5.6 million to remove the dam completely from the river. Can you believe it'll cost $330,000 to decommission the dam under the current partial decommission contract? That's the cost the city will pay over the next 6 months to do that partial decommissioning. The river group's engineered estimate to repair the broken gate ranges from $50,000 to $100,000. Surely the least expensive fix and the return of our heritage river status to its historic beauty and use is the best economic alternative. And you do not have to be an engineer to know that the announcement made just this morning that another $500,000 is going to be expended to fix the erosion at Harris Park and many storm drain outlets at the area. Those all could be saved by having a sustained level of water at the forks with no necessity to spend that money for purposes of fixing the growth along the edge of the river across from the embankment at the forks. So this picture that Don will now show you was taken some 3 weeks ago. You can see the impact of the low water level at the forks. Historically, there was 1.5 meters of water under the Dundas Street Bridge at this time of year. Now look what it is at the moment. Well, ideally, we need water at the forks from mid-May to mid-October during the recreation season for the athletic value and the recreational value of the Antler River Junction. The Blackburn Fountain would actually have enough water to be functional. Here on our Back on the River program is intended to be an inclusive integration and coalition of stakeholders. Concerned citizens, the London Community Foundation, adjacent commercial landlords, service clubs, artists, entrepreneurs are all affected. The thousands of former stakeholder users of the river who have been precluded from engagement since the demise of the dam have all been disadvantaged. Could we look to San Antonio, as Malcolm suggested, and the image of a river walk in downtown London? We believe the decision should be revisited by council. It's our earnest hope that the vision catch the imagination of Londoners, particularly as we approach an election in the next couple of months, as we strive to find a way to create a seasonal reservoir of water that stretches from Springbank to the forks of the Thames. Will enthusiastically engage a visionary application of recreational and environmental concerns of the citizenry and help to restore the beautification of our heritage river. Well, how might Rotary be engaged, you might ask? Just as Rotary International President Jennifer Jones asked us to imagine Rotary, imagine a computer service of electric public boats designed specifically for river commuting from Byron terminating at Dundas Place. The river trail could be a center for development of new systems of transportation that reduce the city's carbon footprint. The solar-driven water taxis, the paddle boats, the dinner cruise craft would constantly but quietly in motion to provide diversion from the eye and peace to the ear. You would actually be able to see the river from our marvelous walking trails adjacent to the river with the 20-year-old invasive species cleared out. The high level of activity around the river would reflect the original purpose of this recreational river for commuters, for athletes, for paddlers, for anglers, for tourists, and for sightseers. This council has little time left to decide to restore the dam at Springbank, so we ask you to dream with us and take action in the hope that the river might return to its original beauty and function. From Barry and I, thank you for the opportunity to share our vision and our statement of purpose. It's been good to be with you once again.
Do we have any questions for Barry and John?
Actually, I don't have any questions other than the quality of the water at Fanshawe Park. Won't we end up getting the same quality in the impoundment in London?
That's a question for Barry.
Okay, as we pointed out, they do periodically, depending on need, augment the flows going down the river. One of the main reasons why they have a problem at Fanshawe Lake is that over the years, the material has gathered in behind that impoundment, and the level of what we call the benthic area, which is the lower area of the river, has accumulated with a lot of nutrients that support the growth of aquatic vegetation, such as blue-green algae is a real problem. The fact of the matter is that we're talking about a seasonal dam, not a permanent dam.
Right.
So the dam is functional for about 4 to 4.5 months during the year. There will be some accumulation of material behind that dam, and but those that have used the area behind the dam, the stretch from the forks down to the dam, have not really seen a significant increase in blue-green algae when it was in use. And the fact that the water is released, after the 4.5 month period, doesn't allow the benthic area to accumulate all those nutrients that support the aquatic vegetation. So to be honest with you, yes, there will be, some accumulation of nutrients because it is an impoundment for that short period of time. But the fact that it is released, after the 4.5 month period, doesn't allow it to be an ongoing issue for the 12 months of the year.
And Steve, I would simply add that the engineering done following the demise back in 2002 for the dam that was to be opened in 2006 was unique. It was a dam that was structured in such a way that the hydraulic lift system would allow the gates to permit the water to flow over the threshold of the bottom of the river. So it could not only be raised and lowered for the seasonal time, but it could be released and flushed, if you like, at any time should there be a problem or a need to do so. It was a unique dam structure, and aside from one sheared bolt, we would have been enjoying that the effects of that dam today.
A great presentation, thank you.
If I may, I'd like to ask two questions. First of all, what was the original rationale behind the construction of the Springbank Dam? And I'm not originally from London, so you have to fill me in a little bit. And secondly, I'd like to follow up on what Barry said about, I don't understand the relationship between low water levels in the river and the amount of raw sewage being able to get into the river.
Thanks, Bud. I can answer the first part of that question, leave the environmental one to Barry. Back in the 1800s, the city of London, the growing settlement, needed water. So it created a dam at what we call the old pump house, which is upstream a kilometer or so from the existing dam in Springbank. That provided for a mechanism to actually pump water up to Reservoir Hill. Reservoir Hill then fed the water by gravity down to the residents of the city of London. The recreational dam was built in the end of the 1920s, and it was purely a recreational dam. It had no impact on flood control, and there was no other motive than to create a reservoir that would permit the continuation of a navigable stream between there and the forks. So it's always been a recreational dam and used for no other purpose. It does have some effect, as Barry will tell you, in connection with environmental issues, however.
Sorry, Bud, could you just restate that question about the discharge of sewage?
Well, you
What's the
talked,
relationship between the low water and a higher water and the control of the sewage dumping?
Well, it's a dilution technique which is used when low water conditions, and the discharge coming from the sewage treatment plants is going to be consistent. So the augmented flows are used to put more volume of water down the river to dilute down the effluent which is coming out. Now the effluent contains treated effluent, but there still is contaminants such as phosphorus and bacteria coming from those discharge points, along with total suspended solids and many other contaminants which are not removed during the treatment process. So we have the situation where the discharge volumes are going to be consistent, but the receiving water where the discharge is entering needs to be moved down, diluted down, and moved downriver. So that's the purpose of the augmentation flow, which comes from Fanshawe Lake, originating from Wildwood. I don't know if that answers your question, Bud. May I miss the point?
no, I think you've got it, Barry. You mentioned that there was all kinds of raw sewage getting into the river as a result.
All right, let me expand on that. What we have in many of the areas of the older areas of the city is what we call combined sewers. And so what we get is combined sewer overflows, which are referred to as CSOs. That's when the design of the collection system is that it's collecting sewage, but at the same time, blended with that is the stormwater. So things going down the catchment areas on streets, paved surfaces, are blending in with the sewage, which is coming from residents, the sewer pipes coming from residents. And so that all accumulates in one single pipe. And then if you have a heavy rainfall event, then you've got a high volume of water. What's the city going to, the plants are designed to handle a certain volume of sewage coming in. If you have a 20-year storm or a 50-year storm, you've got a high volume of water which is entering into the sewage treatment plants. They can't handle that volume. So what they do is they have holding tanks, but if it's an extreme event, even the holding tanks aren't sufficient enough to hold back that sewage before it goes into the river. So as I pointed out, what happened in 2021, September 22nd, they had to release it. And this happens, it's an ongoing problem. They have to release it into the river. So raw sewage and partially treated sewage is released into the river to get rid of it.
Thank you, Barry.
And just
John, I want to have a question. It's political in nature. Now that we are past August 31st, our current council is a lame duck council because more than 5 representatives are not seeking re-election, which means they cannot make any decisions whatsoever because they cannot commit to the new council because there's not enough representation on a new council from the existing council. This is municipal law. So what is your strategy to deal with that fact right now? And how do you hope to at least hold off the start of the decommission until you can get in front of the new council?
Really good question, Rick, and let me try to field that. My understanding of a lame duck council is a little different from yours. My understanding is that the council is not permitted to make financial decisions in excess of $10,000, hard to believe, during this period prior to the election. They are not prohibited, however, from saving money. So one of the strategies between now and the end of the term of these councillors, which continues to give them responsibility for governance in the city, would be to persuade them to get rid of a $350,000 expense and put the dam back up at 1/3 of the cost. That's one sort of political soundbite that may or may not be of any value. But I think our major strategy is to talk with candidates, including Jerry, who I see there today, and inform them, educate them about the effects of the decision made that has changed the flavor of our river and our downtown area on the river, and talk to a new council as opposed to the existing council. Hopefully persuade a new council to make the tough decision to revisit the question, open it up for public debate again, for an objective discussion of the values of the river and the attributes of a revised dam or weir system that will give us water at the forks again, and try to persuade them by educating them on the value of a revitalized river. I don't know if that helps or not, Rick, but that would be.
Yeah, it does. They certainly, you won't get them to be able to spend money on rebuild. Unfortunately, we run out of time. You're making a statement, or are you asking a question?
Jerry has a hand up. I'd like to hear from Jerry.
I'll tell you right now, John and Barry, there's a really easy one for me. And because currently I'm not far from the river, I'm a regular a volunteer with Antler River Rally and various other activities. For me, this is a very simple non-brainer to reopen it and to reassess it. I think that there are so many positives out there that we have this potential great asset, and it's so far it's been a liability last few years, and we need to change it to an asset. So for me, it's a no-brainer to reopen and reassess.
Thank you, Jerry, and I hope when you get elected, you take a lead on this. We'll be watching.
I'll tell you right now, if that would be the case, that certainly would be, and I'm not going to say, because again, I know your initiatives and the work you have done in your group. I know all the other story from the other sides, but is it worthwhile to reopen and reassess? Absolutely, 100%. 100%. All the places that I lived in the world, the water was always an asset and attraction. For us, it's not.
And it appears that we have lost President Rick. So I will continue the meeting. I'm not sure. I'll have to find my notes on the agenda. Give me 1 second. If Rick joins, let me know. We have reached the end of the time for the speaker for today, so no more questions, unfortunately. However, we would like to thank Barry and John, and just give me a second here. We would like to thank you for your presentation to the club today, and in recognition of your presentation, a contribution has been made to the Polio Plus campaign of the Rotary International Foundation, so that 50 additional infants can be immunized against polio. So thank you very much, John and Barry. It was a very interesting presentation and very timely. We do have some announcements from the bingo committee, or our last bingo in August. Randy, do you have an update?
Yes, on the 24th, we worked a bingo. That was yourself, Don Bork, Jack Scott, and myself. We had a very quiet night. We raised $2,500 for the bingo pot. As you can tell, of course, it was close to the end of the month. So, but it was very successful. We balanced, which is always important. So it went well.
Okay, and the next one is from Diane. We have another opportunity to volunteer at the food bank on September the 19th from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you have not volunteered at the food bank before, not all of it is heavy lifting, difficult work. It's more like grocery shopping. So it's a great opportunity to serve the community. We have a little bit of fun when we're there. We make jokes at each other's expense. So it's a kind of a good night out, as well as helping the food bank out. The Satellite Club is planning 2 more park cleanups. They keep running into rain out challenges. So they will be October the 4th and October the 18th for Cavendish Park. And I forget the other park name, but there will be an email about that as we get closer to the dates. And then from a youth exchange perspective, Ian or Randy, who wants to talk about our exchange student?
I can make a couple of comments. Nanda arrived, of course, and she's now going to Saunders Secondary School. She's a very sporty, very athletic young lady, very, very busy, and wants to remain busy. So if you folks have anything going on, fundraisers, if you're doing walks or runs, she would be a perfect candidate for that. Very, very active. We hope to introduce her to you on our next in-person meeting. And I'll try to get her there early so that she can be a greeter at our meeting.
Also very musical and plays the flute and is looking to join the band at Saunders and possibly the orchestra as well. So besides being very athletic, when we had her at our cottage before school started, it was not unusual for her to include a 30-minute run, a 1-hour bike ride, kayaking, and also a bit of a swim. So, she's definitely wants to keep active. Very bright girl, and actually her family has given her many opportunities for travel in her young life. They've been to Thailand, they've been to South Africa, Australia, Costa Rica, parts of the US, all over Europe camping. So very, very intelligent young lady, very energetic, and very, very pleasant as well.
A second announcement related to youth exchange is we are looking for Nanda-like students to send overseas during the 2023-2024 school year. So if you know anyone in high school, grades 10 and 11 are preferred. There are sometimes options for the grade 12 students. But if you know someone that is in grade 10 or 11 right now that could benefit or be developed by the experience of living abroad for a year, we are recruiting students. So it could be children, it could be grandchildren, it could be the neighbors' kids. We would be glad to sit down with them, explain the program to them, all the different things that are involved, and convince them that they want to go. So there will be an email and social media postings following, but more of a heads up for everyone. So to wrap up the meeting, because Rick has not joined us, he texted me and said he was having problems connecting. So we will take care of everything here. Our next meeting will be September 26th, and our guest speaker will be Mayor Ed Holder, and that will be our dinner meeting at the Highland Country Club. The next Satellite Club meeting will be September 20th. And it will be Nicole Pariseau from the Boys and Girls Club of London presenting. We have a board meeting on September 21st at 5 p.m. and Coffee Clutch on Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. And that is everything for this week's Rotary meeting. We would like everyone to imagine what the Rotary Club of London can be and can do in the community. Thank you and have a good day.